All right, everyone. Welcome again to our investigative webinar series, Investigating the Ocean. This is the first webinar, and we are going to be talking about how to report on regulation and governance. So our agenda for today, Elizabeth, she will share the behind the scenes of her reporting. That should take about 15 minutes. Then Jelter and I, we will share tips and tricks for investigating ocean regulation and governance. And finally, we will get to your answers and your reporting, the questions that you have, and reserve 25 minutes for that. And Elizabeth, take it away.
Okay, thank you so much. I introduced myself before, but just briefly again, so I was a Pulitzer Center Fellow in 2024, 2025. I got to spend a year reporting on deep sea mining, and two of my big projects were an investigation into the deep sea mining company, the Metals Company. They're one of the leading companies that are pushing to mine the deep sea. And more recently, I published an investigation with CNN International on China's deep sea mining fleet. So I'm sure Fernanda and Jelter are going to take you through many of the laws and regulations that set the rules for the ocean, but I was just going to talk about the ones that were most relevant to my work on deep sea mining. So first of all, I have to say it like commercial deep sea mining has not actually begun anywhere. There's a lot of talk about it. There's a lot of reporting, and it's something that not everyone realizes. There has been exploration, but there has been no commercial mining yet. But lots of interest, and this interest is in both international waters. So when I say international waters, I'm talking about the high seas, the waters beyond national jurisdiction. And also within nations' own territorial waters. That could include like the exclusive economic zone, territorial waters. So if mining were to go ahead in the future, the rules that would govern such activities would depend on where the mining would take place. I'm primarily today going to talk about international waters. So there is a framework known as the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea, or UNCLOS. It was established in the 80s. It didn't come into effect until 1994, and it was signed and ratified by 168 parties. And there were also 14 UN member states who signed but did not ratify, and that includes the United States. So UNCLOS is quite complicated. I mean, people spend their entire careers trying to interpret it. And some of the basic tenets are, it defines like maritime zones, including like exclusive economic zones and what is the high seas. It establishes the idea of freedom of navigation, where all states are allowed to travel freely and conduct scientific research on the high seas. There are provisions for the protection of the marine environment. And there's also language in there that talks about how we manage the seabed and its resources. And the seabed is considered to be the common heritage of mankind. And there is language in there to make sure that there is equitable access to whatever the seabed has to offer. So that's UNCLOS. But in the creation of UNCLOS, there was also a mandate to create an organization, which some of you may know, called the International Seabed Authority, or the ISA. I'll probably just refer to it as the ISA going forward. And that came into existence at the same time as UNCLOS. Actually, I'm not even, sorry, Fernanda, I forgot about the slides. Should we put the slides up, actually?
They're up.
They're up. Okay, I don't
Yeah.
see them because, all right, I'm not seeing them on my screen. That's okay. We'll just carry on. I will let you handle that because I can't see where they are. Anyway, so the ISA is this kind of obscure organization headquartered in.
Sorry to cut you off, Elizabeth, but the participants aren't seeing the slides and I'm not either. So maybe you need to reshare the screen.
Let me do that. Sorry. Can you guys see the slides now?
Now we see it.
Yeah.
Perfect. There it is.
Cool. Okay, so there's a nice photo of the ISA building in Kingston. They're this obscure organization in Jamaica. And look, I went to the ISA once to cover a set of meetings in 2023. It was very interesting back then because media was not allowed in the venue, and I ended up doing most of my reporting in the hotel room while watching the live stream. But the ISA is made up of any party or nation that joined UNCLOS through ratification or accession. And there are four primary organs. There is a policy-making organ known as the Assembly, which includes all ISA members. There is a 36-member council of elected members that supervise operations and approve plans of work for mineral exploration and exploitation. There's a secretariat, and there's also an organ known as the Enterprise, which is meant to carry out deep sea mining activities on behalf of the ISA itself. And there are also some secondary organs like the Legal and Technical Commission, and there's a financial committee. So how would mining take place in the future? Well, the ISA has not issued any exploitation licenses. When I talk about exploitation, this means like extracting minerals for, commercial use. And so that has not happened, but it has issued 30 exploration contracts. And to get a contract, a company or country would need to be sponsored by an ISA member state. These exploration contracts are generally granted for 15 years, and they give a contractor exclusive right to explore for deep sea minerals in a particular area. And they also give the contractor the ability to eventually apply for an exploitation license in the same area. Now, as I mentioned before, one of my investigations was looking at China, and China is the largest holder of exploration contracts at the ISA. They have 5, and that doesn't sound like a lot, but it is the largest number. My reporting partner and I, from CNN, we used maps of the exploration areas that are, delineated by the ISA to track vessel traffic of Chinese vessels that are doing this deep sea mining work. And China has 40 oceanographic research vessels, actually probably more. And in my investigation, we were able to pinpoint 8 of the vessels that were involved in deep sea mining research and exploration based on their presence and activity in Chinese exploration areas that were granted by the ISA. Well, that's a mouthful. That's a lot. So a fun fact about UNCLOS and the ISA is that vessels are actually not prohibited from going into other nations' ISA areas and conducting research. So can you go to the next slide, please, Fernanda? So this is a graphic from one of my, a graphic that was published in the investigation that I did with CNN. And this was tracking the movements of a Chinese vessel. And it was, this vessel in particular took a 25,000 kilometer journey from China to the North Atlantic, starting from December 2023 onwards. And they basically just it appeared that they just went to visit ISA areas contracted to a French Research Institute, to Poland, to Russia. And actually I'd reached out to the ISA to say hey, what is going on here? Is this allowed? And actually they are allowed. So states can go to these areas that are not theirs, and they can even collect a limited number of seabed minerals for their research. What is prohibited is collecting minerals for the purpose of prospecting or exploring with the aim of eventual exploitation. And also states can't test mining equipment in areas that are not theirs. They can do it in their own areas, but not other areas. But you can already see there's a lot of gray area, So is it just is it just exploring for research or for something else? So if you please go to the next slide, Fernanda. This is a screenshot from a really fantastic tool called Deep Sea Mining Watch. Some of you might already be familiar with Global Fishing Watch, and this is a bit of an offshoot of Global Fishing Watch, and it works in a very similar way, and they're still developing the tool. And but what is really fantastic is that they have the polygons of the ISA areas, and they've also compiled some great lists of vessels that are involved in deep sea mining work. So journalists can go in and they can see what vessels are doing in these areas, if they're going slower at particular times or lingering in certain areas. So it's great. It's free. You can set up an account, all free, all open, and it's really fantastic. So we relied pretty heavily on this tool as well as some other tools in our research. And I just want to say too, like, this tool is also going to be really important in the years to come. If deep sea mining does take off, then we're really going to want to see what vessels are doing. So going back to UNCLOS and the ISA, so it is widely accepted that the ISA is the only legal regulator of deep sea mining activities in international waters. But then we have the United States, and which did not ratify UNCLOS, and they have observer status at the ISA, but they're not a voting member. So in 1980, the US created their own law called the Deep Seabed Hard Mineral Resources Act. That's a mouthful. You just can call it DSHMRA, which is the acronym. And this law is overseen by the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, or NOAA. And NOAA would basically be the regulator of these activities. So DSHMRA was actually supposed to be an interim measure until UNCLOS came into effect, but the law is still on the books. And through DSHMRA, the US has previously granted exploration licenses to companies like Lockheed Martin, and NOAA is now considering both exploration and exploitation licenses from many other companies, including the metals company. Is it legal? Well, the US sees it that way. The ISA and many member states of the ISA, including China, they see it as a violation of international law. So yeah, it's very interesting, and it's definitely something that I hope journalists continue to look into. And another really interesting thing about these two laws is that, the metals company, which is this Canadian company that held several licenses through the ISA, they have they're applying to mine in areas for which they held exploration licenses through the ISA, but they're applying for the same areas but through the US, which could constitute a breach of their obligations to the ISA. The ISA hasn't made a decision of what to do yet, but they're looking into it. And again, it's a really interesting thing that's happening. There's also some legal experts that are talking about how the US needs to actually follow customary international law, which means that it would still need to follow UNCLOS provisions, even though they have not ratified it. I am not a legal expert. There are tons of great resources about UNCLOS and customary international law online if you're interested. So I also just thought I would talk about the executive orders that have come through and that kind of kickstarted the deep sea mining craze that has happened since Trump took office. So in April 2025, the US government issued an executive order, which was calling for the acceleration of the deep sea mining sector in the US. And that was not only in international waters, but also in territorial waters. So an executive order, is it a law? Not really, but does it have the force of law? Yes. And it's can be used to instruct federal agencies to act on these priorities. So as a result, we're seeing some things happening in the US, like NOAA is working to, changing rules to more quickly process deep sea mining applications. They're also consolidating rules that would allow companies to apply for both exploration and exploitation licenses at the same time. And then there's another agency, the Bureau of Ocean Energy Management, BOEM, which is in charge of would be in charge of deep sea mining activities in federal waters, and they would use different regulations. So they're also there's been some proposals for rule changes that would also accelerate deep sea mining. So the US has its own rules. And another really interesting fact about ocean governments is that the ISA has actually not come up with a final set of rules that would say how deep sea mining can happen in international waters. They've been working on these rules for a very long time. I forget how many years it's been, but it's been a long time. And one of the reasons that the metals company TMC pivoted to the US is they said it was because the ISA was taking so long to come up with its rules. And TMC also previously tried to accelerate the ISA rulemaking process by triggering this really arcane provision in UNCLOS known as the 2-year rule, which prompts the ISA to finish its rules or the mining code within 2 years. And if that's not complete, they would have had to technically give the metals company an exploitation license. And again, there's really great information online about the technicalities around the 2-year rule. But the plan actually did not work. I was in Jamaica for the meeting when the 2-year rule expired. And so the metals company did not get their license as they were hoping to get, but it did generate a lot of momentum. Like there was a lot of talk about like, yeah, we have to finish these rules and let's set more meetings up so that we can meet this deadline. But as of right now, they have still not finalized their rules. They're meeting again in July, and we'll see if there's any progress with that. So the ISA does not have a final set of rules to govern this activity that is, accelerating very fast and getting very close to starting. And then when you look on the US side, which has DSHMRA, DSHMRA does have rules, but there are a lot of people who are saying like these rules are outdated. So so what we're seeing is like this new industry that could be starting very soon and without concrete rules in place or without perhaps modernized rules in place. And that's certainly something interesting to keep an eye on. So I don't know. Those regulations are, have been largely relevant to my work on deep sea mining. I could talk a lot more, but I think that I'll probably end it there. If there's any other questions, you're happy to drop it into the chat or I think have we gotten through all the slides? I think so. Yes. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Elizabeth. And I encourage you all to take a look at Elizabeth's work because she has been on this beat for years now and has unique insight into all the different layers of regulation and different players and their interests. So it's a really solid piece of reporting.
Thank you. And I hope it wasn't very confusing. I know there were a lot of acronyms and a lot of, I was throwing a lot of information, very dense bits of information. So it's a lot to unpack, but important stuff to know if you're looking into deep sea mining.
Thank you so much. And if you have questions for Elizabeth, please put them in the chat, and even some she can answer via writing. And now we will jump to some tips and tricks from the data and research team. And this was made kind of as a creative research presentation. So how we approach stories that address regulation and governance. And we're starting with baby peacocks. I know it's a weird thing to start off with, but if you do put these two words together on a search engine, you will see a lot of AI-generated imagery. And the internet is full of AI-generated nonsense, and we thought, it would be great to have a series that kind of covered investigating the ocean from start to finish and provided a useful framework for journalists. And ultimately, it's important to start here because governance shapes everything, right? Policy shapes coastal communities, markets, ports. So if your story doesn't address that, it will really miss the big picture. That said, we will be using some AI-powered tools. And that my take personally is that AI can be great for getting us started, but it always has to have the rigorous glance of a journalist to fact check it, to compare it to other data sources, and to be used in an ethical way. And I am looking forward to that conversation in our chat afterwards if somebody would like to bring it up. So by the end of the session, we have 4 main points. The first one is to understand the division of waters. So we will be talking about global frameworks, UNCLOS that Elizabeth just mentioned, also about RFMOs and how they influence ocean governance. We will be talking about 2 tools there, Notebook LM and Pinpoint. They are both tools developed by Google. The second point is that we will map government agencies responsible for different sectors related to the ocean world. So fisheries, shipping, marine protection. And this is all to the purpose of creating who's a responsible map. And then the tool that will be helping us with that is Perplexity. The third point, we will use OSINT methods, mainly dorking, to locate official documents, licenses, enforcement records. And finally, we will be talking about lobbying, which is a billion-dollar industry and very important for this topic too. So the first point, again, division of waters, national and international legislation, and Notebook LM to help us make sense of it all. And I had to include this map because I just love it very much. And this presentation actually made me go and see the story of it. So I linked it here in case anybody is curious. So what are we looking at, right? When we talk about ocean governance, this image was made by the European Commission, and I think it's very useful to help us visualize. I will call your attention to 2 main things. First is the exclusive economic zone. So this is an area within 200 nautical miles that contour a given country. And the exclusive economic zone is regulated by that specific national jurisdiction, which is very different from the high seas, because the high seas are marine areas that are beyond any national jurisdiction. And the High Seas Treaty was ratified this year, a huge celebration for the ocean community. And we will be talking about that in a little while. But I also love this because it shows us that there's a lot of layers that are governed by national laws, regional agreements, and also international treaties. And before we jump to an example, also some terminology. What does not appear in the previous image is a concept that is very important for us, which is marine protected areas, MPAs, that they are established by national policies or international treaties. Their goal is basically to for restoration and for biodiversity conservation. And that is done in a variety of ways, but the main ways would be to limit activities that can be done inside of that zone, and sometimes to even restrict the area completely. So to just close the area down and not disturb it. We will also be talking about regional fisheries management organizations that are the RFMOs. And that is a body, a regulation body that comes together when countries share certain fishing interests. Let's say many countries are interested in fishing tuna, then all of these countries come together, they provide regulation in order to do that. And here I again sourced the European Commission because they have a really good website showing different RFMOs and hyperlinking it to their official websites, and then you can see different species here. The goal of an RFMO is sustainable fishing. So their job is to manage quotas, gear restrictions, to monitor seasons, and yeah, to make sure that everybody is doing sustainable fishing in the end of the day. And one thing that I love showing is that we can visualize this on a map, so we don't really need to reinvent the wheel. We could open QGIS and other visualizations platforms, but Global Fishing Watch is a super powerful tool. It is great for ocean investigations because, as you can see here, we can just tag exclusive economic zones or marine protected areas or RFMOs, and then just hover up across the screen and see what kind of information pops up, right? Here is the west coast of Africa. And then, for example, if there are certain RFMOs here, if we go to the Learn More button, it will redirect us to their website. So very powerful tool for knowledge, for visualization. You can import your own data sets here too, and I love that about it because if you need to compare and contrast, visualize different things that the platform doesn't offer, at least it gives the base map. And then from there, we continue to build. I added Protected Planet as a resource on this presentation as well, because it gives the polygons that you could then upload to Global Fishing Watch if you would like to. So you can explore protected areas and OECN, which are other effective area-based conservation measures. And then there's many filters that you can use if you look into a country. For example, as I did here for the case of Morocco, we can see that there are 92 total protected areas. We can see the differences between terrestrial ones and marine and coastal protected areas. And then you can download this polygon and yes, add it to your own database, visualize it in other platforms. So it's a really useful place to go. So when we're investigating all of this, right, gathering our research and everything, we need to understand that there are the international treaties and also the national jurisdiction. And I thought that the best way to illustrate this would be to jump into an example. So I'm very biased, I'm Brazilian, and then I chose to look into Brazil. So my way to go is that I would first make a list of all the supporting documents that I need for my research. And I would make this a mix and match. So the first document that I got was UNCLOS, then the High Seas Treaty. I also got Brazil's report to a certain UN session where they make promises. And then I got national legislation, so the Code of Water, the National Ocean Policy, the National Policy on Marine Resources, Coastal Management Plan, Interministerial Commission, which I learned in this presentation. So the governing bodies of Brazil, different ministries are responsible for different things related to the ocean. So this commission is actually where they all come together and decide on a North Star. And that, and another thing that if your story is related to fisheries, I highly encourage you to go and check out the Global Fishing Legislative Database that is organized by the Outlaw Ocean Project, because they have tons of valuable information there. You can see the oversight body, you can see if the registry is open or closed, things that they have ratified. So these are documents that are either on a Google document, for example, that they leave it available, the information for journalists, or they will be hyperlinking to the official websites. So it's a really great resource. Um, and I've just listed so many resources there. And I think that you might be thinking, wow, that's awesome, but that's 800 pages that I have to research, and I don't have time for this. I need something quick to develop to give me insights. And this is where Notebook LM comes in. So, Notebook LM is an AI assistant tool for researchers, reporters, academics, and it lets you, I think that the magic of it is that it lets you upload your own documents. So, documents that you have vetted, that you say, this is a credible source, I trust this information. It doesn't go and look at all the nonsense of the internet. It just looks into the documents that you instruct it to and then generates insights from there. And before we jump to the platform itself, I just wanted to point out that 2 of my links of the 8 that I had listed there, they Notebook LM didn't recognize them. They said, we don't support this format. So my workaround was to use Google Chrome and save them as PDFs, which then Notebook LM did recognize. But there are many workarounds around this. You can use Instant Data Scraper. We even have a webinar where we show this tool. So if one format is not working, please do insist in a different type of format, and eventually it will work out. So this is my folder. You can see all of the 8 documents that I have listed before here. And it is talking about Brazil's National Coastal Management Plan and ocean human rights submissions. Because of time, I was going to do a demo and ask about mangrove conservations, which was a topic that I had seen in the paperwork. But let's first get through the presentation, and then in the end, we can do a demo. But just so, yeah, people that are not familiar with Notebook LM can check it out. This is where the sources will be stored. This is where you will have the chat with your material, basically. And what is really interesting is that there's this studio component. So you can generate reports from your documents, infographics, even structured data. And it's just, yeah, very powerful to look at the material in a different way. This is a mind map that I have converted related to Brazil's ocean governance. And I really like how it did the breakdown of the national jurisdiction and the international one. And all of this, in the end, we are looking for stories, right? We are trying to think, okay, what is a story idea from that? And I think we can shape it in many ways. It depends on you, your editorial interests, the editorial interest of the outlet that you work for. But a possible story could be government spending. So, how much money was designated to mangrove restoration? How much was actually spent of the designated budget? Another inquiry path would be, is legislation up to speed concerning vessel gear? So how does the government both protect marine species and artisanal fishermen? You can also have a compare and contrast angle. So if you're looking into Brazil or South America, you can see different countries and how they're shaping up their legislation and possibly identify some gaps, like why is this country more careful in a certain fishery legislation, while this one that shares kind of the same area is not. So that, yeah, that will all lead us to interesting questions. We can explore environmental impacts, regulatory compliance, trade, governance gaps, sky is the limit. And I also linked to Pinpoint because different from Notebook LM, Pinpoint is great because while you're doing, for example, interviews with experts, you can transcribe all of your interviews there. You can also upload documents, and Pinpoint will generate entities. So let's say you are uploading an official document from the Ministry of Fisheries in Brazil. It will recognize the name of the Minister of the Environment and separate that name for you. So you kind of have a bigger view of the companies that are mentioned in the documents, the people that are mentioned there. Um, and it's in the end of the day a nice way to organize your research. And this I just threw in as a fun fact, because what happens if countries fight with each other, right? If they can't really sort out, they have different governance interests, and they're like, I don't understand you, you don't understand me. There is an international tribunal for the law of the sea. And this is just an example here of Luxembourg against Mexico opening up a case. There's a link to this document. And one interesting venue for journalists could be to look up at all of the cases that are listed there. Each case that they address, they will list. And then you can see if your country or if your country of interest is cited there in any way, and if there's any disputes that have been resolved or are still ongoing. So takeaways from point one. To always use trusted sources to get the documents that you need, to have a good mix of international treaties and also national legislation, so we're not looking only in one direction or the other. To rely on Notebook LM when we need to analyze hundreds, sometimes thousands of pages, and to ask specific questions. And in the end of the day, think about how the information provided can build a story, can, transform into something that is of public service. The second topic that we're going to be talking about today is how to map government agencies responsible for fisheries, shipping, and marine protection. And the tool that we will cover is Perplexity. So we talked a little bit about international legislation and national jurisdiction, but again, right, the layers of ocean governance. And there is also sector-specific regulation. So the IMO regulates shipping. The FAO manages fishing. RFMOs also manage shipping. And as Elizabeth showed us, seabed mining is regulated by the International Seabed Authority. So keeping track of all the different industries will also really help us be directly to the target in our research. So let's jump to an example. Let's say we are looking into Spain, right? Spain is a country that I'm not familiar with. So the first thing that I would do is kind of try to understand a big picture of what is going on in Spain. Specifically, here I told Perplexity, I'm interested in the fishing sector and I want to know what are the agencies responsible for oversight and how quotas are distributed. And Perplexity is basically a tool that will help you have a chat with the internet. It's very user-friendly, and in all of its answers, it will give you where it pulled that information from, so you can follow the trail and see if where it's pulling from, if it is something that you would trust. But the first answer, it gave me a long answer, but it was saying how governance is split between the EU and between the Spanish government, and talking about some Spanish laws that are regulating fishing. It also provided with this table of institutions, what they cover, kind of their relevance. And from here you can see, so maybe the total allowable catch will be in the EU Council website. And then from there, you can start mapping out which websites or which authorities you would need to interview or websites to visit in order to compile your information. Here's on the EU side where they were talking about the tax and the legislation on the Spanish side concerning fisheries. And Perplexity even had editorial suggestions for us, an AI editor, look at that, but giving kind of a suggested path to say, okay, you're looking into fisheries. So I would first identify the stock, then find the total allowable catch decision, then see if that matches what Spain is showing in their documentation. So it gave path forward, which we can agree or disagree. But what we are asking all the time is these four questions that I put up top. Who has the authority? Which agency is supposed to enforce the decision? Two, who has the data? Who is producing the information that we need? Three, who profits from either things going right or things going wrong? And then four, who benefits when enforcement fails? I think that these are nice questions to keep in mind. And then I also listed here handy databases. So the FALEX database will be important for anybody investigating information concerning national fisheries laws. It's pretty updated. Yeah, just something that is handy. And then if you're interested in trade, I also really recommend the UN Comtrade because it will show you big picture trade flows. You won't get into the granular details of, okay, I'm interested in this fish. Who are the companies that are trading this specific fish? But you can see here, for example, I put Japan as a reporting country, and that you can see over 2025 the traded value, the weight of that trade. It just helps visualize different years, if the value has gone up or down, also in terms of weight, which you can then compare with official documents, right? And with quotas. And also to never forget about collaborating with academics and researchers, to always look up who's investigating this, sometimes for a very, very long time, right? Fishing industry or self-governance, and sometimes when we don't have a starting point, right? Like, what is the best fish or the most relevant one in this economy? We can find some answers there. I highlighted here some species, but that is always great collaborations to have with researchers. So takeaways from point two. First one would be to ask yourself, how familiar are you with a certain jurisdiction? Do you need help understanding what are the agencies that govern that jurisdiction? If the answer to the previous question is yes, then Perplexity can help us do that initial mapping. Fact-checking Perplexity's answer is always super important, and yeah, comparing them also with relevant documents, entities, studies, and other type of documentation that you gather along the way. And once you know how a sector is organized, how it was regulated, you know also where to look for further information about this. And now you might say that I am looking into an easy jurisdiction, that there's a lot of information about Spain, about the EU. Sorry about that. And you're right, there is a lot of documentation online. So we can go for a bigger challenge. So point number 3 is that we'll be using OSINT methods to locate official documents, licenses, and enforcement records. And Ecosia is a search engine that I really love because it uses Google and Microsoft Bing, so I just think it's more comprehensive. And 100% of their revenues goes toward planting trees. So that is amazing. And the example that we're going to be looking at for Google dorking or Ecosia dorking is if you're looking into bluefin tuna in Libya. I'm also not familiar with the jurisdiction of Libya. So initially, I put this question in Perplexity, and I didn't really think that Perplexity gave me a lot of information. I couldn't find loads of things. I could find the ministry responsible for fisheries, but I couldn't find tons of information, and it does not help that I don't know Arabic, so I only had access to certain parts of what was online. But I do know one thing, and I know that Libya is a part of the RFMO that deals with Atlantic tuna. So I was like, okay, we can go and search their domain. And while searching their domain and putting the keyword Libya, I came across meeting notes that were, the meeting was held now, like in March of this year, and it gave really valuable information about what is the quota of 2026 that Libya can fish of bluefin tuna. It also gave really good sources. So people that are responsible, the Libyan commissioner to this RFMO, their contact information, telephone, email, also of other people that could be possible sources. If you have any questions, you could reach out to them. And this was searching their domain specifically. But if sometimes you are unsure of, okay, I'm investigating a certain topic, but I don't know which Google Doc to use, an LLM can assist you with that, right? You can be, again, specific on the prompt and say, I'm interested in Libya, I'm interested in bluefin tuna, I want to know which domains, what dorks you would suggest. A list will come up. From that list, we build on because then understanding the formula, we can apply it to different domains, different kinds of documentation. This was also just information that was present in the meeting notes, talking about transshipments, talking about how the vessel monitoring system, everything that if you spot that this is not happening in reality, you can go back to the documentation and say, well, but this was the the rules, right? Why are they not being held? And here just another list of possible dorkings, or dorks rather. And for example, the first meeting note I found with this first dork, and then I was like, okay, because this worked with a PDF, why don't I try a CSV and see what pops up from there? And it was really nice going that because I saw this huge list of inactive vessels that could fish bluefish tuna. And not only were the vessels listed, but also the companies that they worked for. So that again expands our research because now I know, okay, that vessel is inactive, but if I search this specific company, will I find their vessels that are active? And we will have on the second session of the Investigating the Ocean series, we will talk more about that. So how to investigate vessels and companies and how to locate them on the map. So more to come on that note. And also press releases, right? They also add to the supporting documentation, keeping up to problems in the past. For example, this story here was from 2019, and it was saying that there was a problem with the administrative, with the people regulating the season of fishing tuna in Libya, the authority responsible for that. So it is a dated update, but it would be interesting to follow up. What measures were taken place? How has the committee reestablished? What was different? What was kept the same? To see the reality of 2026. And finally, the takeaways from point 3 is that LLMs or AI-powered platforms, they can point us to working directions, but it should be on us to execute the commands and filter out the credible sources. And always keeping in the back of our minds that meeting notes, press releases, and just any supporting documentation will enhance the reporting overall. And now I hand it over to you, Jelter.
Yeah, great. Thanks, Fernanda. Lobbying, yeah. I'm going to be talking about lobbying as well as politically exposed people or persons. Yeah, let's go. Next slide. So, why would you look into lobbying? You already have so much to do for your reporting. I am sure a lot of leads to follow. You will probably look into the money, look into some corporate ownership. I would advise you also to look into lobbying. I'm going to give some examples later, but basically, um, usually the influence corporations can have on politics and vice versa is regulated. I mean, in some countries it's not. It can be illegal, if the lobbying is actually a case of bribery, where a company is literally paying a politician to push through something. If the lobbying is not being disclosed, if the lobbying is being done by a former politician who doesn't respect the kind of cooling down period a lot of countries have, it can be illegal. More importantly, I think in a lot of countries where it's not illegal, it can be immoral, right? We need to look at this confluence of power and money in the end to kind of hold to account every actor behind any kind of environmental destruction. Here's some figures. These are from the US. So the pharmaceutical industry and health product industry spent almost 7 billion on lobbying since 98. Oil and gas is about 3 billion, and defense industry is 1.5. This is defense industry obviously has other influence on the government in the US, but this is from disclosed lobbying. Also, foreign government and overseas politicians have spent more than 5 billion in the past decade. Next slide, please. Here's an overview of some lobbying in the EU. You see, this is for 2024 to 2025. See big tech putting a lot of money into influencing EU decision making. Next slide, please. So, as an example of how works in stories, I'm going to Elizabeth's story on deep sea mining. In short, deep sea mining company TMC, their sales pitch was we need critical minerals. We need to do deep sea mining for these minerals. It'll power the energy transition. And then Elizabeth noticed that they kind of changed their sales pitch and they started mentioning defense. So next slide, please. Here are some quotes. So as you can see in the second quote, that Elizabeth used lobbying disclosures. And she put links in the story. Next slide, please. And later I will show you where she got some of these lobbying disclosures. So that's actually here already. So to get lobbying disclosures in the US, there's a great website from a nonprofit organization called Open Secrets. They collect a lot of that. And then on the LDA website, which Elizabeth used for her website, for her story, you can find information about which lobby groups um, are active. And then there's also the Foreign Agents Registration Act. This is from any kind of foreign lobbying. And you can also look up any filing there. So any kind of lobbying done by entities outside of the US. You'll see the clients of the lobbyists, so who they're lobbying for, how much money they're contributing, and also whether they work with any kind of public relations firm. And then if you find that out, you can dig deeper and look into the public relations firm. Next slide, please. So this is the homepage of Open Secrets. They do great stuff. They have good explainers of their tools, really good search engine, and kind of analytics as well, of lobbying in the US. Next slide. And this is the one also mentioned before. It's the LDA one. Here you see the registrant group, so the lobbying group, the Vogel group, who are lobbying on behalf of the metals company. This is a screenshot of the behind the scenes for Elizabeth's story. And you can see here how much in what year they invested in the lobbying. Next slide, please. Great. The US is great for transparency and lobbying, at least for the ones that are disclosed. Outside, it's a little bit different. The EU has some good websites for that. There's the EU Transparency Register, there's Lobby Facts, and Transparency International in general has some information about lobbying across the world, but they have a specific subsection called Integrity Watch EU, which is great info on lobbying in the EU. I put some links there also for Australia, Chile, Mexico, France, and the Netherlands. But there's more, but not every country in the world has a lobbying disclosure kind of regulation. And if they do, they might not have it online either. Next slide, please. So this is the EU Transparency Register. It's good because it's up to date. You know, as up to date as EU things are, but it's not as intuitive as the next slide, which is lobbyfacts.eu. This one is a bit easier to look for organizations and clients of the lobbying firms. Also, you can search by topic. The thing is that their information is, I think it's like maybe a year behind or something. So if you want more recent stuff, go to the EU official one. If you need some help with your search, like if you want to look by topic or client, use LobbyFacts. Next slide, please. Here's an example of what you can find in LobbyFacts. If anyone of you has worked on big fishing companies in the EU, you've probably come across Parlevliet and Van der Plas. That is the Dutch pronunciation. It's one of the biggest fishing companies in the world. And if you look them up in lobbyfacts.eu, you'll see that it says there's one lobbying group that has them as a client, which is called G+. They've been actually renamed to Portland. And then you can see, if you go to the G+ profile on lobbyfacts.eu, it'll tell you all the kind of things they were involved in. And going back, I was able to find that in 2016, they were lobbying to influence the regional fisheries management organizations. So here you can have a connection from the big fishing company all the way to the specific subject that the lobbying firm they hired is trying to influence. Next slide, please. So, as I said before, not all countries have online databases or transparency about lobbying. If that's the case for the country you're interested in, you could try some of these other alternatives. So you could use freedom of information requests, or it could be called right to information, depends on where you are. And then request the government agency or the ministry about a specific law and you're interested in or regulation, proposed regulation, and then you could request information about any kind of lobbying groups that were informing, they would call it, the agency or ministry about this law or regulation. Um, you can also go through ads on Facebook and Instagram, see who's been doing kind of grassroots lobbying. Then GIJN, sure a lot of you are familiar with them. They have a more detailed guide than what we could cover here today. And then also the last thing is build your own database, right? Something we often say in investigative reporting and data reporting is if the data is not there, you create it. So you can build your own database of politicians, for example, people involved in politics, cross-reference them against other data sets, see if they've been talking to certain people, if they're involved in companies in an industry. Yeah. Talking about PEPs, I'm gonna go a little bit more in depth into that in, I think, 2 slides. So next slide, please. It's already the next slide. Whoa, okay. So this is an example of a story we did on politically exposed persons. Basically, anyone involved in politics is a PEP. And for this story, our fellow, our ocean fellow Gideon, he wanted to know how many politicians are involved in Ghana's fishery sector. He did a freedom of information request, and the list they gave was quite short. So what we did is we got the information from all the biggest Ghanese fishery companies, pulled out who are the managers, shareholders, the directors, and then we did a cross-reference with list of PEPs, which I'll talk about later. And then we found that a lot more of them are actually, a lot of people in these Ghana fishery companies are involved in ministries that are regulating the same industry, and it's not disclosed, and this is immoral, if not illegal. Next slide, please. PEPs, POIs, these are acronyms often thrown around like small change. What does it mean? A POI, a person of interest, it's a term from law enforcement. We use it kind of loosely, but the narrow definition is someone who might be related to a criminal activity. Okay. And then a PEP is any individual who holds a prominent public position, according to Moody's. I also put a link here to the LexisNexis definition, which gives you more subsections, more clear definitions. Both of these terms are from finance, regulation, and due diligence industry. So these are companies that are basically checking whether a company is sketchy or not. They do this for investors, for example. Note that this is an industry, so their conclusions, you should take them with a grain of salt, and you basically need to do your own due diligence whenever you're relying on a report of theirs. So where do you find lists of BEPs? If you can get access to LexisNexis, Reuters, or Accurus, these are such organizations that have lists of people of interest and PEPs. And then you could cross-reference that with any company or anything you're investigating, see if these people have some sort of political uh, public position. Some countries have their own lists, like Brazil has one, Mexico has one. Um, then if you cannot, if your country, the country of your interest does not have a list, and you cannot get access to any of the organization, you can use sanctions lists. Sanctions list often mention people in power if they've been targeted. Obviously, you need to use this with caution because sanctions lists, they are political, right? These sanctions lists represent um, the interest of one government over another. And then some countries have other types of lists, like France, the Ministry of Labor has a blacklist. And these blacklists can be for people who should not be involved in any company because they are political. So there might be lists of political people on these as well. Next slide, please. Um, you can get these lists either by working with LexisNexis, Accurus, or Reuters, but they're also included on the corporate data platforms like Sayari, Orbis, and LexisNexis's like search function or platform. These cost quite a lot of money, so if you're a newsroom or you can't afford that, there's some alternatives. Um, for example, you can rely on some leaks databases, WikiLeaks and ICIJ's offshore leaks. They will mention people in power. You can go off of those, but they're very incomplete, right? It's only the stuff that's been leaked. It's only the things that have been mentioned in relation to companies on ICIJ's offshore leaks. Your best bet is probably to team up with a journalist-friendly organization like OCCRP or DARC. Or Open Sanctions or AML Watcher. They all have lists, of PEPs that you can use for your investigations. Um, Yes, and also you can request it from governments using FOI, but as I showed in the example, they can be incomplete, right? So a government might not be telling you everyone who is in power in a certain ministry. And that's it for me. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Jelter. I will stop sharing my screen so we can address questions. Thank you, everyone who has sent a question. And thank you for Ella for helping me compile them. So the first one that we will talk about is coming from Joaquin Salis. And they are asking, is Notebook LM useful for scientific studies? I think that with everything that we have presented here, it depends. So, for example, let's say you're conducting a scientific study and there's a lot of researchers that you know their work, you trust their work, and you would like to download a bunch of their articles in order to gain insights about a specific topic. That is very valid, that you just compile a lot of different information, different articles about a certain theme, and then from there, talk with that material and understand what it's saying, ask specific questions. One thing that I think I forgot to mention is that each notebook that you open up in Notebook LM can only have 50 sources of information. So yeah, not more than that, but you can open multiple notebooks if you desire to do so. Any comments on that, Jelter? Should we move on to the next question?
No, we can move on.
No? All right. Um, so another question is coming from Kanika. And they're asking, hi, can you please explain what is dorking? And certainly, I am so sorry that I have not explained before. So, dorking is when you type specific formulas on a search engine to go directly to the information that you want in a sense of when you're building a dorking formula, you will indicate different things, right? Different keywords. So the example that we used, it was Libya and fishing. So I could put between citation marks Libya, I could put fishing, and then I could put file type PDFs. It would show me only PDFs that contained those two words and nothing else. If I put file type CSV, it would show me only CSVs that related to Libya and fishing. So it's basically a way to search engines, but that they go directly to the point, take out all of the noise, only look for the keywords, for the domains, and for the file types that you tell it to look for. All right, jumping to the next question. This one is coming from Andre, and they are asking, do you refer to using Notebook LM or other AI tools when publishing reporting? What level of transparency do you provide audiences? Um, yeah, I suspected that this question would come, and I said earlier on in the presentation, for me, as a journalist, as a researcher, Notebook LM and AI tools, they are very useful for mapping. They're useful for studying. If you don't understand the context and you want to get more information about that, if you want to see that the path that you're going on, if it's the correct one or not, where you can find documentation or data, you can consult these platforms in order to do so. For writing, I think that is completely a no. Like, as a journalist, you are a wordsmith, or if you're a video journalist, I guess you're not. But I mean, that should be your responsibility as a professional. And at the Pulitzer Center, our different organizations have different ways of working with AI. But for us, what we have decided to do is whenever we are, because we don't publish stories, right? We're not a publication. We're an NGO that supports journalism. But every time that we use AI to build a web page, we will have in the end a disclosure of what tools were used in what context, like, was it used only for research? Was it used for writing the content itself? So we will have a disclaimer of how AI was used in the production of that content. But again, different organizations follow different paths. But yeah, I'm a big fan of when organizations make that open and clear. Yelter, any comments from your end?
No, that's exactly what I was gonna say as well. Yeah. It's an editorial decision. But yeah, definitely support transparency.
Yeah, for
And
sure.
also, guys, if you're applying for grants with us, please don't write it with AI. You can use it to translate it, but please don't send us a full AI application.
Yes, because we definitely spot those. But for translating, right? English is not your first language. And we even admire so much when journalists say, hey, I wrote this, but I used an LLM to translate it because I don't feel super comfortable in English. That's great. Um, Yelter, I feel that I'm talking too much. So John's question I will direct at you. And
Yeah, I wanted to take this one. This one's
yes.
from John from Kenya. He wants to know how well is ocean data captured from African countries, because he wants to write impactful stories in the context of African countries. So this is a quite a broad question. Ocean data can mean lots of different things, right? It can mean information about fisheries, information about marine protected areas, information about companies involved in ocean things. It could mean like scientific data about the state of the oceans, how warm is the water, for example, how much salt is in the water. When it comes to scientific data, where you want to analyze the state of the ocean, that's pretty well covered, I would say. You have platforms like Copernicus, um, Marine Observer, I think. Um, they have scientific data about the ocean for the whole world. Also, when it comes to tracking vessels, for example, that's very well covered. If you look at platforms like Global Fishing Watch, Marine Traffic, they have global data. Um, when it gets to, for example, the activities of specific fisheries, that gets a little bit more, it gets a little bit harder. I think it really depends from country to country. The example I gave from Ghana, we knew which were the biggest fisheries active there. But then again, the FOIA information we did about who is in which politicians are in these companies was incomplete. So it really depends from country to country. Um, yeah, I think that's gonna be my final say on that. Though one thing just to add maybe is that as you know, a lot of non-African companies are active in African waters. So if you're looking into fisheries and fishing, you can look at you're not only reliant on data from African countries. You can use data from European countries and other countries that are active in African waters.
Awesome. And I will take that hook to address a question from Rohit, where they're asking what tools can be used for countries that don't have much information available in the public domain, like South Asian countries. Um, there are many workarounds. I really love when I'm investigating ocean stories, like Global Fishing Watch is something that I go a lot to, like really, because not only can you see the RFMOs, the EZZs, um, you can also select a country. So let's say you're looking into Indonesia. You can download over a certain period of time all the vessels that have been in Indonesian waters, right? Having the information, the names of these vessels, you can then go to other platforms and understand what are the companies behind these vessels. And we will cover this on the next webinar. But there, I guess what I'm trying to say is that there's always a starting point. If you don't find a lot of information looking up official ministry websites, government websites, if FOIA, Freedom of Information, is hard to obtain in your country, there is always a lead that you can research. And always strings to pull. It only depends on what part of the process you first start pulling. Anything to add there, Yelter?
Yeah, I would say often things are there might be more available than you think. Yeah, either going through the international route, like for example, if you're looking into companies in Asia, they might have American investors, and these American investors have to publish information on the U.S. Security Exchange Commission, for example, and they might have information there. And this is where the kind of Google dorking that Fernanda talked about is really useful to really try to find in the weirdest little corners of the internet, you might find some information. Like a company might have done a presentation at an international conference, and they might have uploaded this presentation online on a website somewhere, and you might find it. And then also when you're looking into other countries, try different search engines. You know, if you're looking into Russian-speaking countries, use Russian search engines. Also, try different um, languages, different scripts as well. So yeah, I think often there's more online than you might think, and otherwise, going on the ground is always an option if you have the funds, of course.
Yes, one thing that we stress a lot is you can't find a database. Build your database, right? Talk with experts. Start understanding what are the data points, the entries, what is the best way to tackle this subject, and eventually you will arrive somewhere. And that ties a lot to Shoma's question, asking, is there a way to find data on marine noise pollution? For sure, for sure. There must be so many NGOs that have different reports across different regions of the world. Again, academic articles that have been studying this for years. And sometimes even a casual interview with an academic to understand how they created all of their body of knowledge, so you can go and access those sources or map the people that have the answers that you need.
Yeah, actually, this is a good thing for me. I'm going to put a link in the chat. I'm going to say it out loud as well for those who won't have access to the chat. Marine Copernicus, so marine.copernicus.eu, it's what I talked about before. They have a lot of data, scientific data about um, the oceans, and they did this project on noise pollution as well, mapping noise. I put the link in the chat. So yeah, it's a really good source for that.
And so I will also put it into the slides so we don't lose the link. Um, and that brings us to Rosie's questions. How do you like to best collaborate with academics? Use their existing research or expertise as background info? Co-report together? What? Again, this is an editorial decision. Yours, the one of your outlet. We have seen fruitful collaborations in both ways of mentioning their research, but also building something new together. And that's really powerful, this interdisciplinary approach to a certain problem, right? Having journalists, researchers, everybody looking at the same problem and proposing solutions. So yeah, I think it comes from what you and your editor decide. But still having these conversations are always worthwhile, right? Like sitting down to talk, um, and see what they're willing to do, data sets that sometimes are not even public yet, but with a journalism collaboration, they would be willing to co-publish one an academic angle and another one a more journalism angle.
Yeah, I second that. Definitely, I would always reach out to the academic that published the paper. The paper is the first step, but like to properly interpret it can be very hard. Any kind of ocean scientist I've talked to, they definitely said they prefer working together with the journalists to get an accurate reading of their data and of their findings, rather than having been quoted somewhere from their findings, and maybe it's not a completely accurate representation of how they want it presented. And then, as Fernanda said, there's way more stuff that they have, and they often can't wait to share that with journalists. So any kind of conversation you start is always going to be fruitful.
Yes. I think that this is our last question, and it is by someone that's asking, how do I transition into the conservation journalism and science communication? What are the mediums I should invest in? Should I go for a Substack to start publishing and building experience? Um, My tip there is even when I'm reviewing things as an editor for the Pulitzer Center, um, I don't mind really where you publish your story, like in a sense that you could publish in your personal blog or you can publish in the New York Times. What I'm interested in is if the story is good, if it's well researched, if, if it brings yes, interesting elements. If I've seen the reporting in different angles, if it's balanced, all of those things. So it's not really the destination that you have been published, it's more the work that you show, and that is the most important thing. So of course, if the ocean is a topic and it is a beat that you want to cover and continue covering, Substacks, personal blogs, any place is a start.
Yeah, I think for like if you're open to science communication, I will go there first. There's a lot of these magazines on ocean specifically for the community, and maybe use your expertise, your background in marketing to get a position there, and then move on to more like editorial reporting positions.
Awesome. I believe we have covered all of the questions. Thank you so much to everybody that has stayed for the full hour and a half. Thank you so much to Ella for curating the questions for us, helping in the background. Really appreciate everybody's time. Hope that this session was useful. A reminder that we will have 3 more sessions about tracking ships, monitoring ports. We will also have another session about following the money. And the final one will be about labor rights. So please stay tuned. And thank you so much.
Fish, are we sending out the presentation and the recording to anyone who signed up?
Yes,
Oh,
everybody that signed up will receive the recording will be on YouTube, so that is open, but the presentation will be sent to your emails if you signed up. Thank you. Bye bye.